The rain fell heavy that evening, turning the streets of Lagos into rivers of mud and waste. Under the third mainland bridge, 15-year-old Stanley huddled beneath a torn piece of tarpaulin, his stomach growling with the familiar pain of hunger. 3 years he had lived like this. 3 long years since his mother died and left him alone in this cruel world. "Oh yeah, move from there, you dirty rat!" a security guard shouted, kicking at the cardboard boxes Stanley had arranged as his bed. "You are making this place to smell. Go and find another bridge to sleep under." Stanley gathered his few belongings, a faded photograph of his mother, one torn shirt, and a small Bible she had given him before she died. As he walked into the rain, passers-by crossed to the other side of the road, holding their noses as if poverty was a disease they could catch. At the traffic lights, Stanley approached a black SUV with tinted windows. "Please, sir, please, ma, anything for food," he begged, his hand stretched out to the driver's window. The window rolled down, and a woman's face appeared, twisted with disgust. Look at this dirty thing. Driver, move this car before this rat touches it. Do you know how much this SUV cost? If your dirty hand touches my car, I will call police for you." The people around laughed. Some brought out their phones to record him. Stanley's eyes filled with tears, but he had learnt not to cry in public. Tears only made people laugh harder. As the SUV sped away, splashing dirty water all over his already wet clothes, Stanley whispered the words his mother used to tell him. "My son, when the world treats you like dust, remember that diamonds are found in the dirt. Your day will come." But standing there in the rain, hungry and humiliated, Stanley wondered if his mother had been wrong. Maybe some people were just meant to suffer. That night, as he searched for a new place to sleep, he had no idea that tomorrow would change everything. He had no idea that saving one life would expose secrets that had been buried for 15 years. The next morning, Stanley woke up under the abandoned warehouse near the waterfront. His body ached from sleeping on concrete, but he forced himself up. He had learnt one thing in 3 years of homelessness. If you don't move, you don't eat. He walked to the small bridge where kind-hearted traders sometimes gave him leftover food. The sun was barely up, and the area was quiet except for the sound of the water flowing beneath the bridge. Then he heard it, a scream, then a splash. Stanley ran toward the sound. There in the water below, a girl was drowning. Her school uniform billowed around her as she thrashed in the current. A school bag floated nearby, already drifting away. "Help! Somebody help me!" she cried out, her head going under the water. Stanley looked around desperately. The street was empty. No one was coming. His heart pounded in his chest. He couldn't swim very well. His mother had only taught him the basics before she died. But the girl was going under again. Without thinking, Stanley jumped. The cold water shocked his body, but he pushed toward the girl. She was panicking, pulling him down with her as she grabbed at him. Water filled his mouth and nose. For a moment, he thought they would both die there. "Please stay calm," he gasped, remembering what his mother had taught him. "I will help you, but you must not fight me." Maybe it was the calmness in his voice, or maybe she was too tired to fight anymore. The girl stopped struggling. Stanley grabbed her and pulled her toward the bank, his muscles screaming with effort. By the time he dragged her onto the muddy shore, his lungs were burning and his arms felt like they would fall off. The girl coughed up water, gasping for air. Her expensive school uniform was ruined, covered in mud and water weeds. When she finally caught her breath and looked up at Stanley, her eyes widened with recognition. Not of him, but of what he was. You are one of those street boys," she said, her voice shaking. She tried to move away from him even though she could barely stand. Stanley's heart sank, but he was used to this reaction. "Yes," he said quietly, "but you are safe now." Before she could respond, the sound of sirens filled the air. A convoy of cars screeched to a halt on the bridge above them. Men in black suits ran down toward them, and behind them, a man in an expensive agbada, his face twisted with panic. "Regina, my daughter, Regina," he shouted. If you want to see what happens next and discover the shocking truth that will change Stanley's life forever, please subscribe to this channel. You won't believe where this story is going. The man who reached them first was Chief Bernard Okonkwo, one of the richest men in Nigeria. Everyone knew his face from newspapers and television. His company, Okonkwo Holdings, owned half of Lagos. My daughter, my Regina, thank God. Chief Bernard fell to his knees beside the girl, pulling her into his arms. His expensive clothes soaked up the mud, but he didn't care. What happened? How did you fall into the water? Daddy, I was running from those boys who always harassed me on my way to school, Regina said between sobs. I didn't see the edge of the bridge. I fell. Chief Bernard's face hardened with rage. Where are my useless security men? Where were they? He turned to his guards. Find those boys. Today they will know that you don't touch Chief Bernard's daughter. Then his eyes fell on Stanley, who was standing aside, shivering in his wet, torn clothes, trying to be invisible. Who is this one? Chief Bernard asked, his nose wrinkling. Daddy, he saved me, Regina said quietly. He jumped into the water and pulled me out. The silence that followed was heavy. Chief Bernard's guards looked at Stanley with surprise. Some of the onlookers who had gathered began to murmur. This dirty street boy saved Chief Bernard's only daughter? Hey, is it true? See how God works, so... Chief Bernard stood up slowly and walked towards Stanley. The boy wanted to run, but something in the man's eyes made him stand still. When Chief Bernard stopped in front of him, Stanley could smell expensive cologne mixed with the muddy water. Young man, Chief Bernard said, his voice thick with emotion. You saved my daughter's life. What is your name? Stanley, sir. Stanley Nwampo. Chief Bernard's face changed. For just a second, something flickered in his eyes. Shock? Recognition? But it disappeared so quickly that Stanley thought he had imagined it. Stanley, Chief Bernard repeated slowly, as if testing the name on his tongue. And your parents, where are they? My mother died 3 years ago, sir. I never knew my father. Again, that strange look crossed Chief Bernard's face. He reached into his agbada and pulled out a thick bundle of cash. Take this. It is 500,000 naira. And here, he pulled out a business card. Come to my house tomorrow. I want to do something more for you. You saved my daughter. I must repay you properly. The crowd gasped. 500,000 naira. Stanley's hands shook as he took the money. It was more money than he had ever seen in his entire life. But as Chief Bernard turned to leave with Regina, one of his guards, a man named Festus, stepped forward. Chief, are you sure about this? This boy, he is a street rat. Who knows if he pushed the girl into the water himself just to play hero and collect money? Festus, Chief Bernard's voice was sharp. This boy saved my daughter. Show him respect. But Stanley saw the way Festus looked at him, with hatred and suspicion. And he saw something else. He saw that Regina, even though he had saved her life, would not look at him. She kept her face turned away, as if the sight of him disgusted her. As the convoy drove away, Stanley stood there, holding the money, wondering why Chief Bernard had looked so strange when he heard his name, and wondering why saving someone's life could still make him feel so small. That night, Stanley couldn't sleep. He had hidden the money in 3 different places under the warehouse. He had learned the hard way that street life was full of thieves. But it wasn't the money that kept him awake. It was Chief Bernard's face when he heard Stanley's full name. Stanley Nwampo. His mother had given him that name. Your father's name, she had said before she died, her voice weak and full of pain. Stanley, promise me you will never forget his name. Umanko, one day you will understand everything. But she had died before she could explain, and the only other thing she left him was a photograph, the one he had protected for 3 years, kept dry in a plastic bag, even when everything else got wet or stolen. Stanley took out the photograph now, in the dim light of a street lamp that shone through the warehouse window. It was old, faded, the edges torn. In it, his mother stood beside a young man, in front of what looked like a university building. They were both smiling. His mother looked so young, so happy, nothing like the sick, tired woman who had died in his arms. The young man had his arm around her shoulders. He wore an expensive-looking shirt and a big smile. Stanley had stared at this photograph 1,000 times,
trying to see his father's face in his own reflection. Was this man his father? His mother had never said. She only cried whenever he asked about the photograph. But now, looking at it again after meeting Chief Bernard, something clicked in Stanley's mind. The shape of the face, the eyes, the way the man stood with that same proud bearing. His hands began to shake. No, it couldn't be. He had to be imagining things. Chief Bernard Okonkwo, one of the richest men in Nigeria, could not be the young man in this photograph. And even if he was, it didn't mean anything. Plenty of men had children they abandoned. Plenty of rich men had secrets they buried. But tomorrow, Stanley was supposed to go to Chief Bernard's mansion. Tomorrow, he would get close enough to see the man's face properly, without the panic and mud and water. Tomorrow, he would know the truth. As dawn broke over Lagos, Stanley made a decision. He would go to that mansion. He would collect whatever reward Chief Bernard wanted to give him, and he would look into the man's eyes and see if they were the same eyes that looked back at him from the old photograph. What Stanley didn't know was that inside the Okonkwo mansion, Chief Bernard was also holding a photograph, the same photograph, and he was crying for the first time in 15 years.
The Okonkwo mansion stood behind high walls and golden gates that made Stanley feel even smaller than usual. The security guards looked at him with disgust, checking him 3 times before they let him through his side gate, not the main entrance. Chief said you should come, but don't touch anything with your dirty hands, one guard warned him, and stand by the kitchen door. Don't enter the main house. Stanley nodded, used to such treatment. But as he walked through the compound, past the fountain and the expensive cars, past the gardens that were bigger than the warehouse where he slept, anger began to burn in his chest. His mother had died in poverty. He had suffered for 3 years in the streets, and this man, if Chief Bernard was indeed his father, had lived like a king. At the kitchen door, a maid brought him a glass of water and told him to wait. Through the open doorway, Stanley could see into the main house. Everything was gold and marble and crystal. And there, in the living room, he saw Regina sitting with a woman who must be her mother, Mrs. Okonkwo, dressed in expensive lace, her neck heavy with gold jewelry. "Mommy, I told you, I don't know why Daddy wants to give that dirty boy anything more," Regina was saying, her voice carrying clearly. "Yes, he pulled me out of the water, but he's a street rat. People like that are born to suffer. It's not our fault they are poor." Mrs. Okonkwo nodded. "Your father is too soft-hearted sometimes. But don't worry, my daughter. We will give this boy some more money and send him away. People like that, if you bring them too close, they will start claiming family connections and demanding things." Stanley's fists clenched. Before he could move, Chief Bernard appeared at the top of the stairs. But this Chief Bernard looked different from yesterday. His eyes were red, as if he hadn't slept. His steps were slow, heavy, and in his hand he carried a large envelope. "Stanley," Chief Bernard's voice shook. "Come inside. We need to talk, alone." Regina rolled her eyes. "Daddy, must you bring him inside the house? He will make everywhere smell." "Regina!" Chief Bernard's voice thundered through the house, making everyone jump. "Go to your room, now!" "And you too, Cynthia," he said to his wife. "What I need to say to this boy, I will say in private." As his family left, shocked and confused, Chief Bernard led Stanley to his private study. He closed the door and for a long moment just stared at the boy. Then, with shaking hands, he pulled out the same old photograph Stanley had in his pocket. "Your mother," Chief Bernard whispered. "Her name was Grace. Grace Nwankwo, and I loved her more than life itself." Stanley felt his world spinning. You are my father?" Tears rolled down Chief Bernard's face. 15 years ago, I was just a struggling businessman. I met Grace at the university where she worked as a secretary. We fell in love. We were going to get married. But then, my business suddenly succeeded. Big money came, and my family, they told me Grace was not good enough. They told me I needed to marry Cynthia from a rich family, for connections, for business. Chief Bernard's voice broke. "I was a coward, Stanley. I was a weak, wicked man. Grace came to me and told me she was pregnant with you, and God forgive me, I gave her money and told her to go away. I told her to never contact me again.
I chose money over love. I chose status over my own child. Stanley couldn't speak. His legs felt weak. I have looked for you both for years, Chief Bernard continued. When I finally became strong enough to stand up to my family, when I realized what I had lost, I searched everywhere, but Grace had disappeared. And now you tell me she's dead. Dead! And you, my son, my own blood, have been suffering in the streets while I lived in this mansion. The door suddenly burst open. Festus, the guard who had insulted Stanley yesterday, stood there, and behind him were Mrs. Okonkwo and Regina, their faces twisted with shock and fury. I knew it, Festus shouted. I knew this street rat was trying to play games. Chief, he is lying. He cannot be your son. Look at him. He is probably a con artist who heard stories and... Enough. Chief Bernard roared through the house, making everyone jump. Festus, you are fired. Get out of my house. And Cynthia, Regina, you will hear me now. This boy is my son, my blood, and I will right the wrong I did to him and his mother. What happened next shook all Lagos. Chief Bernard didn't just acknowledge Stanley as his son. He called a press conference in front of cameras from every major television station. Before journalists and society people, Chief Bernard told his story. He confessed his betrayal. He cried publicly for the woman he had abandoned and the son he had let suffer. I am a billionaire, Chief Bernard said into the microphones, his voice heavy with shame, but I am also a man who failed at the most important thing, being a good person. My son Stanley saved my daughter Regina, not knowing she was his sister. He showed kindness when the world had shown him only cruelty. He is a better man at 15 than I am at 50. The video went viral. Within hours, all of Nigeria was talking about it. The story of the homeless boy who saved the billionaire's daughter and turned out to be his son. But the real karma was yet to come. Regina, who looked at Stanley with disgust, who called him a street rat, now had to face her schoolmates. They mocked her endlessly. Your own brother saved your life and you were ashamed of him. They laughed at her, made songs about her, posted it all over social media. She who was proud and arrogant now walked with her head down, tasting the humiliation she had served to others. Mrs. Cynthia, who said people like Stanley were born to suffer, found herself abandoned by her society friends. Other rich women whispered behind her back. Her own family reminded her that without Chief Bernard's money, she was nothing special. She begged Chief Bernard for forgiveness, but the damage to her reputation was done. The Lagos society she had worshipped now rejected her. Festus, the guard who had tried to discredit Stanley, could not find another job. Word spread that he had insulted Chief Bernard's son. In a city where connections meant everything, Festus found all those close to him. He ended up doing the same kind of menial work he had looked down on for doing. But the most poetic karma came from an unexpected place. The traders at the bridge, the same ones who sometimes gave Stanley food, heard his story. They came forward with their own testimonials. They told reporters how Stanley, even when he was starving, had shared the little food he got with other homeless children, how he had protected a blind beggar from thieves, how he had returned a lost wallet full of money to its owner instead of keeping it. This boy, said Mama Ngozi, who sold vegetables at the bridge, he's not rich because of what his father gave him. He was already rich in here. She pointed to her heart. We knew it all along. The street didn't make him wicked. It only showed who he truly was. Stanley moved into the Okonkwo mansion, but he didn't forget where he came from. Chief Bernard, in his journey of redemption, didn't just give Stanley a room in his mansion. He started a foundation in Grace's name, Stanley's mother, to help homeless children in Lagos. Stanley went back to school, but every Saturday, he went back to the streets, to the bridges, to the warehouses, bringing food and hope to those still suffering.
6 months later, at the grand opening of the Grace Nwankwo Foundation Center, Chief Bernard stood before a crowd and spoke words that made even the hardest hearts soften. My son taught me that true wealth is not in your bank account. It is in your character. I had billions and was poor. He had nothing and was rich. I am spending the rest of my life trying to be worthy of calling him my son. Regina, who had been humbled by her own karma, stepped forward. With tears in her eyes, she publicly apologized to Stanley. My brother saved my life, and I responded with pride and disgust. I judged him by his clothes instead of his heart. I am sorry. I am learning slowly to see people the way he does, not by what they have, but by who they are. as Stanley looked out at the crowd, at the street children who now had hope, at the traders who had shown him kindness when he had nothing, at the father who had found him after 15 years, he remembered his mother's words. When the world treats you like dust, remember that diamonds are found in the dirt. His mother had been right all along. This story teaches us that how we treat people when they have nothing reveals our true character. Regina and Mrs. Cynthia judged Stanley by his appearance and treated him with contempt, only to discover he was family. Their karma came not from others' revenge, but from their own shame and the consequences of their actions. Chief Bernard's story reminds us that it's never too late to make things right. His public confession and dedication to helping others didn't erase his past mistakes, but it showed true repentance. Stanley's character, his kindness despite suffering, his willingness to risk his life for a stranger, his refusal to become bitter, proved that poverty doesn't determine your worth. Your actions do. In African culture, we say, the child you mock today may become your helper tomorrow. We also say, do good and throw it in the water. One day it will return to you. Stanley did good without expecting anything in return, and his goodness brought him not just wealth, but restored his family and changed lives. Remember, treat every person with respect and kindness, regardless of their situation. You never know who they are, what they are going through, or how your paths might cross again. The measure of a society is how it treats its most vulnerable members. And finally, parents, acknowledge your children. Right your wrongs before it's too late. The pain of abandonment doesn't disappear just because you are rich or successful. It's never too late to do the right thing. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring African stories that teach valuable lessons. Share this with someone who needs to hear this message today. Drop a comment below telling us what part of this story moved you the most.